You're listening to the Zetetic Newscast on the Zetetic News Network with your hosts, Dave, and Xavier Diamant. Proceed by inquiry.
Happy New Year. This is Dave with ZNN, Zetetic Newscast, and it's January 7th, 2020, a momentous year in this human experience, and I'm joined with the co-host, Xavier Diamant. Xavier, how's it going?
Hey, man. Doing good. 2020. Wild.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think 2019, like any preceding year, is sort of a larval stage for, something to blossom. And one of the things I want to highlight before we just jump right in is the progress that we made at ZNN. So 2019 was really a year of setting up ZNN, getting our equipment, set up, our studio, our space, our format. We've been trying to improve the product and expand the website. We're also trying to network with other like-minded channels, and I think we've been successful, although, we can always improve ourselves. And I got this little summary from YouTube, and YouTube is just one of multiple channels, and probably in 2020 we may even abandon YouTube because YouTube is abandoning free speech and good content. But for now, we are posting our episodes on YouTube, and they sent this little summary, which I think, for the last month of the year, and the fact that we only publish like once at this, on average right now, it's like once a month. But we'd like to do more of that. We're going to do smaller pieces as well as the long form. And so our approach has been, long form and then cutting that up. But just given that, I think this is really encouraging news, and we've got some friends out there like the Morgile who are reposting our stuff, and that has really boosted our statistics, and hopefully people like the content. We really encourage you to subscribe and make comments. We're always open to constructive criticism and want to make stuff that's engaging and relevant for when we do it. So just want to highlight that as we head into 2020. And for this episode, our first episode of 2020, and our fourth episode overall, I sort of envisioned it as like sort of a year in review of 2019, but also looking forward to all these machinations that are taking place in 2019, how that's going to unfold in 2020. And when I started to think about it, it was like so many things were just converging from a societal, social, economic, technological point of view. I thought the best way to sort of frame this whole conversation was to create a list of singularities, because that's how I see it, as all these things converging into some series of like mass black swan events. Now, will they all happen in 2020? That's sort of like what we're going to discuss tonight. And so where to begin? I actually just, was really throwing this together and not putting it necessarily in a particular order. But I think number one is appropriate because the subject of disclosure of advanced energy systems, specifically potentially Tesla-based technology and propulsion systems, it's not a new subject. Obviously, this debate has been going on since Tesla died and his papers were seized by the U.S. government. But it does seem like there are some signs pointing to a singularity taking place with respect to some sort of breakthrough in either Tesla, revelations or technological developments that deliver on some of the promises that Tesla had made back then. And I've included 3 links here in this new article, the top 20 mega singularities of 2020, which sort of point in this direction that, hey, despite all the bad stuff that's happening, perhaps there are some developments happening that might lead to a release. Now, what that means for society is up for debate. How it rolls out, how it, it's charged. Like how do people get the energy or the propulsion systems? I mean, that's a whole another subject. But Xavier, we hung out our little holiday visit the other Sunday, and I mentioned that Trump has an uncle who was actually the custodian of many of the files that were seized by the FBI back when Tesla died, John G. Trump. And this is something that I don't think many people know or are aware of, but they are aware that the FBI sort of took the Tesla files after he died, and we haven't really heard much since. But with the Trump presidency, people are more open to conspiracies, both white hat and black hat. And then you have mentioned the idea of a red hat conspiracy. Right. And with John G. Trump, you can go to this Wikipedia and read about all of his involvement with MIT and Department of Defense, advanced weapon systems, but also the Alien Foreign Property Custodian Office. You can read about that. This is just like an interesting debate. Like, is Trump on the side of, disclosure of this technology, or is he actually part of the problem? His uncle, was doing the bidding, I guess, of the authorities at the time, but is this coming back around, and is Trump now, because of that, is he in a position to maybe make a release? I mean, I don't know. What do you think, Xavier?
It's a huge pivotal question. I mean, I think at bottom, Trump has proven to be well aware of many of the sticking points in American society amongst his base, but also to a great extent his opposition and the massive group of people who don't want to see him succeed in any way, shape, or form. Now, looking at it objectively, Trump is very similar to previous presidents in that he made all these lofty promises in the campaign and really hasn't delivered that much for his constituency, and that's highly indicative of the fact that the Trump name has been within the establishment long before Donald. So as you can see, John G. working with the alien property custodian, I mean, that's near like Department of Defense, CIA level security clearance. So to what extent that information has percolated to Donald is sort of unknown, but the likelihood that he's well aware of these advanced capability technologies is a pretty high probability.
Definitely. I mean, it's a near certainty, given that the president has to have security clearances as well, and everybody postulates as soon as they win the nomination, they're brought into an underground meeting room and basically given all of this information. Even Jesse Ventura sort of mentioned that with respect to his governorship. So, I mean, you just check out the John G. Trump Wikipedia. It goes into all the different establishments. He was the director of the British branch of the Radiation Laboratory, and that's part of the Britain's telecommunications research establishment. I mean, that's
the magnetron. That's a fascinating topic through the Tizard mission. It's really a phenomenal field of research that really just does not get a lot of coverage.
Right. They're focused on all these other canards that, this is so much more important to the advancement of our civilization than P-Gate and Russiagate and all this other crap.
Right. All the saber rattling in the Middle East too. I mean, I really think that there's a concerted effort to flex the secrecy muscles more and more, while at the same time acknowledging we're not able to keep secrets as well as we used to.
Right.
Because there's all kinds of people from all walks of life talking about things that 30 years ago would have been unimaginable.
Right.
So in that sense, that is a real paradigm shift.
Not only that, but cybersecurity, right? All of the data which used to be in, CIA filing cabinets and whatnot, it is stored in most cases digitally in some form or fashion, and that presents a huge vulnerability.
Big.
Which we see happening. I mean, even in the wake of the Iranian fiasco that's going on, we'll talk about that later. There's cyber attacks. There are other well-known hacker cases who have gotten into NASA and gotten very compelling information that, maybe there's more to NASA than the 6 moon missions that went on in the 1960s. But moving on to, number one in the list, Visive Technology. I'm not sure if you've heard of this, Xavier, but
that is
there's a tower that was spotted off I-35 out in Texas, which looks very similar to the Warden Cliff Tower, which Tesla had developed and which was foreclosed upon by J.P. Morgan as a result of the fact that the technology Tesla was trying to bring about was essentially extracting energy and converting it to electricity from the ether.
Yep.
And it was sort of a function of this plane we're on, it was somehow or another, I don't understand the physics, that's why Tesla's so special,
right?
Was able to sort of pull that energy from the ether and distribute it through electromagnetic radiation. And
just imagine if that had really gotten public traction, and the robber barons and the profiteers didn't get to it in time. Well, I mean, you wouldn't have a Duke Power. You wouldn't have all of these energy companies.
Well, what's fascinating, just ignoring the fake spinning globe on the front of this company's website.
Yeah.
What's funny and pretty cool is they have a physics page and they talk about the Zetetic surface wave, and it essentially goes into how there's a part of the atmosphere where this energy can be extracted from and persisted as long as you have the right towers. You think of all the 5G towers they're putting up now, like if they just retrofitted them with the whatever mechanism is at play here, it would be so easy to you get power just as easily as you got cell phone reception.
Yep, and Wi-Fi internet.
Right.
Inside the home.
So Visive Technology, I don't know who has financially backed them, what their actual business model is, because, I mean, as long as we're in a scarcity of resources, fiat money system, right, I don't see a free energy technology sort of taking off, because it really does mean, undoing said system.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of the disclosure versus secrecy debate, is to what extent are these retrograde technological interests that are just interested in scheduling power and monopolizing as many energy access points as possible, versus the inevitability of people finding out that this type of energy access has been suppressed for so long.
Right.
And just the massive Fugazi gambling operation they have betwixt and between that whole dialectic. I mean, it's really something. I mean, the advent of the internet itself was pretty much designed to be the worst kind of surveillance tracking you could imagine for the population. But the flip side of that, of course, is sharing information, being able to comment and collaborate and work with people at a distance in a way that was not, again, less than half a century ago, really imaginable. So,
well, just think of what's going on. I mean, not to get into the Iran subject prematurely, but just the skullduggery and fuckery that goes on over quibbling over oil, which we already know is a extremely plentiful resource.
Extremely plentiful.
You know, it's almost as good as free energy.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's pretty good.
Yeah,
it's pretty good.
And honestly, the price for oil right now is way too high.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean,
no, if you measure it in
fixing.
Silver, for example, another, you know, finite resource,
Right.
we produce tons of it. It's just like it's very high in supply. That's why they have strategic reserves. It's basically to rig the market like the diamond market, you know. And OPEC, of course, yeah, they set that price just like they fixed the gold market and the silver market.
That's exactly right.
The whole market is rigged.
And again, it's just going back
through derivatives and other computer programs.
Precisely. That's the real meat of the opposition to allowing any of this stuff becoming public access. There's just so much high money vested interests in keeping it a suppressed enterprise for the absolute upper elements of corporations and governments, as well as stuff that we don't even really fully know about, and that's, you know, part of the whole secrecy element.
Yeah. So another little bullet point on this number 1 of 20 mega singularities for 2020 is some information coming out from the Navy, and other military industrial arms, basically implying some sort of breakthrough in energy production, compact fusion reactor, and also this article doesn't highlight it as much as some others, but also some sort of anti-gravity drives and engines, and you know, I think I want these breakthroughs to happen, but as long as we're depending on folks like Lockheed and Raytheon and Halliburton and Boeing, who are, and GE, right, who own all the patents, and in concert with, you know, the military, the governmental buyers and funders of these other agencies, are they gonna? Why would they slit their own wrist?
Right.
Why would they slit their control, eliminate their control or their power? Unless you had some sort of philosopher king, you know, philosopher. That's the Hail Mary, right? Is you have some sort of philosopher king who's able to somehow circumvent or overcome these institutions. At some point, though, don't we reach a point in time where, like, we just are inspired? Humans are inspired to the point where we just start building devices ourselves. You know, the plans get out somehow or another. There's a white hat somewhere where it's leaked, and then it's democratized. Can it be sequestered forever? I think that's the big question for 2020, right?
Right. Well, and then you look at that graphic on there, and it's, you know, the whole Einstein thing, and I think if you look into the nitty gritty of it, the fact of the matter is, all of this quote unquote breakthrough technology that's being rolled out by said authority or another is probably derived from the very same seized papers of Tesla.
Yeah.
And they're just rebranding it
derivatives.
under, right. They're just rebranding it under the atomistic guys or the astrophysical guys or what have you. But ultimately, those are just basically authoritarian cover stories and paperings over what is ultimately suppressed free energy technology.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about plasma confinement. I mean, that's in the so-called fusion reactor patent, and that is concentrating the ether ultimately. So I thought E equals MC squared was all about Einstein doing away with the ether.
Right.
Clearly he didn't.
No.
That was, again, another pseudoscientific sort of papering over with complex, mathematical
So what is it
modeling.
they have against Tesla? It just wasn't their idea?
They were scared to death of him. They were terrified that they weren't going to be able to suppress the discovery quick enough, ultimately.
Right.
Because it would have completely undid their whole, mega profiteering scheduled power paradigm. And he was clearly so fluent. He was like an energy prophet.
Also, these people are zealots in the sense that they have sort of an end times eschatology where, I mean, they're planning centuries in advance for a future state that had them in a different state
Definitely
of control. And that's why they call them disruptive technologies. Why?
Yes.
What do they disrupt? They don't disrupt my ability to get energy. They disrupt your ability to control me and my future destiny.
That's right.
And finances.
Well, yeah, and as long as they have an abstractified plantation of conceptual as well as perceptual resource control, then they can again operate carte blanche with this, immunity complex,
right?
Where they think that they are entitled to the power that they have because people haven't figured out how corrupt and abusive their secrecy has been all this time.
Right.
And that's
the most exciting thing about 2020 is, I mean, in the last 3 years of Trump's presidency, I saw the entire society go from denying the existence of a deep state to the opposition using it against their opponents. It's like how Trump sort of hijacked the phrase fake news and used it against his media detractors. It's like, hey, wait a minute, y'all didn't even acknowledge that there was a deep state before Trump was in, but now the deep state will actually talk about it openly.
Right. And then that also can form the whole point that maybe Trump is actually very much an operative and a puppet of this H.G. Wells open conspiracy style of dictatorship.
Well, I think I will get into that later because I want to get into the media collapse and the Ricky Gervais speech and what that was all about. But let's save that for later. I want to move to number 2. Man, this will be a long episode.
Yes, sir.
Because we're only on number 2. But health wars, okay? I really think there's a lot going on that we're just reaching a breaking point. We see in the retail market people embracing, cage-free chicken eggs and GMO-less, labeling and on and on and on and on and on. This is actually how we met, right?
That's right.
Health wars. Yeah. There is a war against your health. There people are waging war against your health, and it's local, more local than you think. You've got neighbors who are actually activists in their spare time to poison you and your family, and that's just the reality of it. That's what we call the public water fluoridation program, which we're going to talk about. But over the break, since our last episode, my wife enjoys some reality TV, and so I get a small window into some of the programming and so on, and she watches some of the Real Housewives stuff. All right. And so what's most funny to me, beyond just the general insanity of all that, is the advertising that happens between these episodes. And I'm just like, it makes me laugh, but it also makes me kind of cry because I'm like, this is a very specific demographic. It doesn't really apply to Charlie because she's not completely insane yet,
right?
But I can discern that, there's a lot of health issues going on with this demographic that is being targeted. And this commercial came up, and I was blown away. Skyrizi. It's for some new drug to treat skin condition, eczema, I think, or plaque psoriasis, etc. Let's just take a look and then break it down after the fact.
I have moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. Now there's Skyrizi. Things I get. Keep your skin clearer with Skyrizi. 3 out of 4 people achieved 90% clearer skin at 4 months. Also, 9 out of 10 sustained it through 1 year. And Skyrizi is 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses. Skyrizi may increase your risk of infections and lower your ability to fight them. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms, such as fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or coughs, or if you plan to or recently received a vaccine. Ask your dermatologist about Skyrizi.
Wow.
I mean, the first thing that jumps out to me, of course, given what we've talked about before, is the chemtrails. The aerosol or the atmosphere. What is it? Atmospheric aerosol injections.
Right.
Clearly, I mean, let's go back to this still here.
Here
Here we go.
3 out of 4 people achieve
Yeah.
your skin clearer with Skyrizi.
There's literally right there a plane going across the screen. It's absolutely in your face.
And then,
but it's fast.
But then she raised her arm. You can see the burns
Right
on the skin, and the lines of the imagery. It's all tied together. It's propaganda.
Yep.
I mean, pure and simple. It's in your face. So the implication that, I mean, to me is, you see the thing that's happening in the sky. You're also experiencing this on your skin. That's me. I need that drug, I need that. But the question obviously should come up, like, what is causing this skin condition? There's no discussion of that.
Oh no, it's
just you have a condition.
Right.
That's the supposition of the entire advertisement is it's not addressing the root cause.
Mm-hmm.
Although it is acknowledging the root cause, because you can
ever so slightly, ever so subtly, it shows you, maybe these two things are connected. But again, you've got to review an annoying pharma commercial. And most people just like, whatever, they'll mute it, or they'll just listen to it and it'll go in one ear and out the other. But in the middle is all this acceptance of, I guess people just do have this condition, and why not get another pill for it?
There's a fancy name for it, so it must just be genetic.
Oh yeah, we're just now catching up with discovering such a condition. People have probably had this forever. But you hear that all the time.
Yeah.
You hear that all the time, all over the place, for all kinds of issues.
But if you look hard enough on the internet, I mean, people report a causal relationship between seeing chemtrails and having negative reactions to symptoms.
Sure.
And it's not conjecture or speculation that these programs are going on. As we've detailed in prior episodes, they are happening. There are reports, mainstream weather reports about them. In California, they conducted experiments which were admitted to. The UN has a treaty convention over using various compounds to modify the weather in this manner. And so it's all experimental, as we've talked about. And so sometimes, experiments lead to skin reactions that you don't necessarily anticipate. And so I don't know. I just thought the advertisement was a major revelation of the methods.
Well, I mean, and it just the fact that this is such a common condition that they're marketing it in Oprah magazine and all over the place. I mean, it's a revelation of the method in a way, because maybe that's one of the reasons, beyond the whole climate scare,
right,
for doing this stratospheric aerosol injection program is, hey, we can profit on the ground.
Right.
Once people get all these arcane conditions.
It's a multi-level marketing scheme.
Yes. Yes, and it's macabre.
It is.
It's dark and nasty.
Yeah. And we'll talk about fluoride. I mean, that's another one, right?
Yeah.
The dental industry, I mean, if they really had your best interests at heart, they'd put themselves out of their job with their water fluoridation program.
Oh yeah, big.
But that's not what's happening. People's teeth are in a deplorable state, So, but we'll talk about that. Let's take a quick. We're back.
Right on.
And we're still talking about chemtrails, geoengineering, and its deleterious effects on the human surface population, and the authorities' willingness to experiment and play God with the climate, the environment, and our health. And during the break, Xavier shared with us a video you shot, I think, in North Carolina here, right? So I'm going to play this clip, and we're going to just sort of observe and maybe talk about it.
It's pretty phenomenal. Okay.
So here you are. Oh my God. So you're driving, and nothing is everything. That's what you're thinking, right?
Yeah, it would mean everything to me if there was none of this in the sky.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you mentioned during the break you've got psoriasis.
Yeah. So I mean, it negatively impacts a lot of people. It's not like people don't suffer from the conditions, and they seek treatments like Skyrizi.
Right.
But
it's not addressing the root cause of the
problem. Just writing that off as, maybe it's a genetic problem. Let's not consider foreign external toxins that are being artificially introduced into the living environment. Let's not think about that so much. That's such a Debbie Downer.
Right. And in case anybody is doubtful of the existence of such programs, which are distributing all sorts of, really, you don't know what is being put there. You don't know what's being put in the fuel. But if you doubt it, just listen to, I think this is John Brennan, just a brief clip from the CIA talking about geoengineering.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels. This process is also relatively inexpensive. The National Research Council estimates that a fully deployed SAI program would cost about $10 billion yearly. As promising as it may be, moving forward on SAI would also raise a number of challenges for our government and for the international community. On the technical side, greenhouse gas emission reductions would still have to accompany SAI to address other climate change effects, such as ocean acidification, because SAI alone would not remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere.
So I know we played that clip before, but it's just worth underscoring again in juxtaposition with Skyrizi and your, your easily documented example of this happening in a it looked like a pretty rural area, So the SIA program at work, right? And don't worry about any sort of deleterious health effects as a result of the geoengineering. By the way, there are none. We're just going to embed it in the commercial, but you can buy this drug, to take care of it. It's not going to address the root cause of the problem, and don't you dare come to city council and talk about it, but we do have a drug for you.
Right. And then, on the back end of it, it's like, we're just supposed to accept it because, it could prevent temperature increases, and, we can live a low carbon life. And meanwhile, it's like, well, you're just straight up poisoning people. Again, it's this elite misanthropy coming back around again in the form of, well, if we thin the herd and cull the population, things might feel nicer the more we're out in the environment.
What's interesting about that brief clip is he mentioned that the SAI program could reflect sunlight much in the way that volcanoes do. So it's like if
a massive destructive explosion is supposed to be analogous to what they're doing.
They spend billions of dollars and they don't even come close to the amount of material or reflective capacity that a volcanic eruption would create. I've seen some estimations that it releases more CO2 and other quote unquote toxic compounds than like the last 100 years of the Industrial Revolution, in one major volcanic eruption, which is, it's just like y'all are just making a mountain of a molehill, right?
Right, with all the, it's C episode.
Doomcasting, right?
Yeah, doomcasting, exactly. It's a form of spell that people just are constantly become more and more anxious and more fearful about the very nature of their existence.
Yeah.
And just capitulate to authorities. And who's the one doing the doomcasting? The authorities, of course.
Yeah. So speaking of delegating authority, delegating your freedom and your thought processes to authorities, how about this? Seattle students without updated vaccination records will be excluded from class starting January 8th. So some people, including myself, see the public education system as sort of a welfare program. It is a childcare program for many people, and they're dependent on that institution to take care of their kids and to raise them for them. And so, but in order to get those services, which you pay for, whether you rent or own property, you're paying taxes indirectly or directly that go right to the public school system, you're going to be excluded if you don't update. They say this is a whitewash right here. Updated vaccination records. It's updated equals having vaccinations. That updated vaccination records that include vaccination. Right. And then on what schedule? On what schedule? So you're saying the school gets to tell you what schedule your kid gets vaccinated in order to learn, quote unquote?
It is just.
What do you think? You've got some little
appalling.
children. What do you think?
It's appalling. The level of infringement and just the
audacity.
The audacity and the hubris to say, oh, we know what's better not only for your children, but for the well-being of society, independent of your research and parental decision-making regarding your children.
Yeah, and then what happens if you...
Unreal.
And then the parents... What is it? It's a Latin term. Parens patriae. It's the Latin concept that the state, owns your children, right? So, what happens if you don't update your vaccination records and they don't go to class? They're excluded from class because you excluded them, not because I didn't take them. They're going to say, oh, your kid's truant. You are abusing your children.
Despicable.
You're abusing them because you're putting them at risk for not vaccinating them, and you're not educating them by taking them to the school because we didn't let you.
Right. Because you didn't poison your child against their will. Potentially.
Consent.
I mean, people were so up in arms about non-GMO labeling and all this food stuff.
But then they're going to take an injection which has cultures of aborted fetal cells from like the 1970s, and fetal blood serum from aborted baby cows,
right,
synthesized and
grown
grown in
artificially.
laboratories. It's unbelievable. It's like
disgusting.
If you knew, most restaurants, you go to, there's something nasty going on, like with the food prep, that if you knew, you probably wouldn't eat there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the case for most people. Most people are like a little even more anal about that than I would be personally, but they don't apply the same logic to something like vaccines.
Absolutely.
It's just blind trust, or fear of something like this, which is probably even worse than a blind trust.
Well, it's part and parcel to the overarching thrust of the authority, because they want it both ways. They want people to just ignore the obvious while simultaneously being fearful of the consequences that they impose.
You should not to trust the flu shot based on how cheap it is.
Right.
If it was so effective, it would not be promoted and basically given away.
Right.
In many cases. So if they're giving it away, I mean,
in the whole defense is, it's not about profit, it's about public safety.
Okay.
And you're going to trust who with that job? The CDC, the EPA, and Big Pharma. Wow. You're trusting the wrong people.
Yeah.
Quite frankly.
100%.
Because those are just the track record for their malfeasance is unreal. Right. It's literally hundreds of miles long. Like if you compiled all of the infractions of all three of those agencies in type print, you'd probably be able to line, half I-40.
Well, they had to create an entirely sort of standalone court system for the litigation that resulted from the injuries caused by vaccines, and all of those cases are handled in as far as I can understand, a proprietary manner. Resulting in the frequently reported, benefit of the pharmaceutical companies who created, it always ends up, they settle, but it's sort of like a cost of doing business. And meanwhile, these people's lives are impacted with their retarded children, for the rest of their life.
Or, extremely exacerbated crippling allergic reactions.
Yeah. Oh, but there's no evidence to show that. We just say that.
Yeah, even though it literally happens sometimes within minutes of the procedure of the
correlation is not causation, Xavier. Don't you know that?
Oh yeah, it's a nice catchphrase. But when they don't even apply it to their own quote unquote gospel science,
right?
It's just a nothing burger phrase.
Yeah,
especially when it's coming from them, because they're the ones who are constantly spinning ridiculous narratives regarding what causes what. Yeah. And it's purely speculative nonsense at the end of the day.
So the vaccine subject to me is sort of like you're either it's too far gone for you. You've been vaccinated too many times, and this goes right into the fluoride issue too. Some people are just like not going to be convinced, and that's okay. But I'm after the people who are on the fence. Maybe they've gotten a couple, or they've convinced themselves that one is, but like just getting people to question what's in them.
That's huge. That's everything.
That's it. Just ask. Even if you don't understand what's in the ingredients, just ask your practitioner for the insert and see their reaction, and then
what they end up giving you,
and then judge based on that.
And what they'll give you is this condescending paternalistic pamphlet that says, "Here's why you don't need to understand what the ingredients are. It's okay.
Right?
We make sure these things are safe. Don't be worried. Just comply."
Look, I eat candy that I probably shouldn't. I eat cake. I eat out, stuff like that. But generally, I try to live by like the motto of like, if I don't understand what's in it, if it's like really complicated ingredients, it's probably not good for me because they're so synthesized and, you know, processed, and it's just not a natural thing. I think most people would agree with that, you know, assessment, even if they would also make some compromise for themselves. But when you look at what's in these vaccines, like, just read the fucking ingredients. Like, it's
It's a
is
witch's
incredible.
It's literally like a witch's potion.
And then just go, like, type in some of the ingredients, like, to government, you know, medical study databases and whatnot, like aluminum, thimerosal.
Right.
Just aluminum, mercury.
And that's like on the surface. Like,
Yeah,
a lot of people know about that one, and that's tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, really is. Especially with the experimental ones.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, the schedule, I think, is something like 25 times more aggressive today than it was just 30 years ago.
Yeah.
25 times. Like for every vaccine in the mid 80s that you're supposed to get for your kids, you've got to get like 20 of them.
Well, you know,
it's unreal.
My wife went through a birth center, and it's supposed to be all natural, etc., but they still recommended her get a vaccine during her pregnancy. And I'm like,
whoa,
why are you doing that? Oh, well, the CDC, you know, recommends it. And I'm like,
no thanks.
Do you recommend it? Well, I didn't take it. It's like, well, then what do you...
What
Shut the fuck up!
Stop proselytizing this, you know, witch's potion.
Exactly.
I don't understand it.
So, anyways, that's a sacred cow. The vaccination lobby, the industry, and really the psychology is something to break down. But there's some really important events coming up with respect to the public water fluoridation scam and crime against this entire nation. I really think
huge.
And again, this is me and Xavier go way back, originating with fluoride activism locally.
Right.
Because our operation is very close to a center of psychological importance to this subject. The Research Triangle Park is right around three major state and private universities, Duke, UNC, and NC State. UNC being one of the top 5 dental schools in the country, and Charlotte and Raleigh being some of the first cities ever to fluoridate their water supplies. And there actually being some ties back to the Duke family and other members of the Eugenics Society. So we're geographically located in an area rich in history with the fluoridation program, and we met that way. We've been active in it, I would say, since we met in 2012, 2013, and have been very active in Orange County, North Carolina, as well as Raleigh and Durham, North Carolina, in fighting this subject locally, which you will learn if you participate rolls right up through federal agencies such as the EPA and FDA, who are complicit with the eugenics program to fluoridate the public water supply. And I wanted to highlight this in our Health Wars segment of the 2020 list because there is a trial coming up in, I believe, April of 2020, which is a citizen petition basically organized by the Fluoride Action Network and Michael Connett, who has been at this subject for many, many years and has done a lot of good work. But they are they filed a petition with multiple activist groups. I want Michael Connett, I want to play a video where he talks about where the subject of this, they got a ruling, I think, in December, and this is going to trial. So the EPA will have to defend the fluoridation policy coming up in 2020.
Same rigmarole they rolled out at,
Right. So this is going to go to a federal judge, and I want to play this. I want you, Xavier, to hear their approach. I've met these people, and we'll discuss whether, what we think, projections about the future, okay?
Surely.
Hi, everyone. Happy holidays. I want to take a second and update everyone about our lawsuit against the EPA. We have really been in the thick of it recently. It's been pretty busy. Lots of things have been happening. And I just thought now, the end of the year, might be a good time to sort of recap some of the developments that have occurred this year. And the first big development, as some of you probably already are familiar with, is that at the beginning of the year, EPA filed a motion to prevent us from having any discovery in this case. Discovery is the word we use in law for getting documents and requesting certain admissions and interrogatories in a case. And EPA wanted to prevent us from having any discovery. And on February 7th, the court issued a ruling denying EPA's motion. So we were allowed to have discovery. And that was an exciting moment for us. And for over the past 6 months, we've been working through discovery disputes, and EPA has produced a number of internal documents. They've also responded to requests for admission. They've responded to interrogatories. And so we have been learning things in this case that when this case is over, we will be sharing everything that we have learned in this case, because I think there are some pretty interesting things that people will, I think, appreciate seeing when this is done. In the fall, the first big discovery dispute arose in the case. We wanted to do what's called a 30B6 deposition of the EPA. And a 30B6 deposition is a deposition where you are deposing the organization or the institution. And it's through the person, they pick a representative, a human, obviously, and you depose them, but you depose them as if the EPA was speaking itself. It's sort of a legal device to get the position of the agency. So the EPA fought us on that. They did not want to provide a 30B6 representative. And the court granted our motion to compel EPA to do that. And on October 4th, I believe the court issued its ruling. So on October 15th, I deposed Edward Ohanian, who is the Associate Director for Science at EPA, and he's been involved with EPA fluoride policies going back to the 1980s. And I deposed Dr. Ohanian for about, I think, 7 hours at the Department of Justice office in Washington, D.C. And I had the opportunity, which was pretty memorable, to depose the director of the Centers for Disease Control's Oral Health Division. On November 6th this year, I went down to Atlanta and went to the Office of General Counsel at the CDC's campus and deposed the Oral Health Division director. And I think that deposition was pretty interesting. And I think we will be looking forward.
Yeah. I think that's a smart approach. I really do. Personalizing, necessarily humanizing the entire situation with an actual stated position that can be reviewed forensically, scientifically, according to present studies and literatures. Because from what I've seen, most of these government bureaucracies, they just regurgitate talking points.
Right.
They just say the same thing that's been disproven over and over and over and over again.
Industry trade groups.
Right.
From industry trade groups.
Conflict of interest out the wazoo.
Even going so far as to rely on intra-governmental testimonies. So like one agency will say a thing and then another agency will repeat that thing that they said as if it was, just gospel, scientific, written in stone truth. And
Delphi method.
Yeah, they generate their own evidence out of their process. It's like, it's just total mind control. That's all it is mind control.
It's this. It's really kind of Kabbalistic Jedi mind trick, like power of suggestion.
When you're in
nothing to see here type stuff.
When you're in a courtroom setting or a city council setting, you feel that.
It is
for real.
They're invoking an actual like order of events that they seek to control.
Yeah, it's just, I always wonder to what degree they're conscious of it, because like the people that we interface with, they're so low density, or high density. They're very dense, high density, very highly dense, and could they be intentionally acting stupid? I mean, yeah, some people, but
I think it's probably just autopilot to a great extent. Like people like shut down and don't actually want to personally engage. They're just spouting what they're trained to spout.
Yeah, right.
And it's just a defense mechanism. Right. It's a coping mechanism.
So like a lot of times they don't even listen to like what you say. They just So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I definitely support FAN, although I depart from them in that they only focus on the science. And that's I went to their conference. I've met Michael. They're obviously good people and they're doing good work, and I will probably donate to their cause for the legal defense. I just don't know how much faith I have in the federal judge to make the right decision. I also don't know process wise, is it a jury? Because if it's a jury, that seems a little more promising, because I feel like if I had the time, if you had the time to, put forth a good oral argument, you could almost convince anybody, absent, just total abandonment of moral, and we have seen that. So I mean, but the jury is supposed to be impartial. So you have control over the jury selection. Whereas like, I don't think I could just convince any like sitting body. I couldn't convince any like a WASA or a city council because of the conflicts of interest, but an impartial jury, which I have some influence over selecting, hopefully that's the case with this petition. But I'm just a little concerned with the whole process and how the courts, they always, just like a city council, they rig it in their own advantage. So
what you really need is a mass traction tort law class action.
Yeah.
It's tort law. I mean, you're polluting the commons and you have no controlled dose.
If you have enough people willing to testify, that they are convinced that they've been damaged. Absolutely. And I've talked to some lawyers about this.
Definitely.
The problem is jurisdiction, getting the right court to hear it, and the actual demonstration of the evidence, so like I have dental fluorosis, I have a degradation of enamel, but how do I prove that it was caused by the water that I consumed from the city? That's the
You'd
challenge.
have to look at infrastructure, piping, and precedents, like which communities haven't actually introduced fluoride.
I think if I had a day in court, I could make the case. I'm confident about it, but that's what the lawyer I spoke to, who had actually a successful action against Nestle for their fluoridated water products, told me was the big challenge with a class action is getting documented, and it takes a lot of resources to sort of aggregate all that information and present it legally. But I think there's a lot of money to be made. Think of all the cities who are doing 70% of the municipalities in the country.
The damage
have caused.
Yeah.
Think of the inventions. If it's true that it reduces your IQ,
right?
The inventions that didn't happen, the musical compositions that didn't happen.
Well, and the awareness that was stifled. deliberately so that all this other stuff can be rolled out without more
without
resistance.
opposition.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
absolutely
The fluoride is one of the biggest.
It's a massive social engineering operation. It's arguably one of the. It's top 4, top 3 scientific frauds. In all of history.
It might be number 1 only because they claim it's the number 1 public health achievement of the 20th century. Really?
Right.
How about? I mean, penicillin has got to be better than fucking fluoride.
Right.
That's absurd. It's absurd.